Learn how to write Wednesday in calligraphy, starting with brush pen calligraphy. This is a modern calligraphy style using a Pentel brush pen. I'm going to rewrite what I have up here. Up here I have the color-coded word so that anytime the color changes, that's when I lift my pen. Because even though calligraphy can have a similar look to cursive, it's actually pretty different. You'll notice how often I'm lifting my pen every time the color changes. I'm also pressing harder on the pen when I want to get a thick stroke, which is always going to be my downstrokes. I always say this, but sometimes the hardest part of calligraphy is remembering to spell, especially as you're focusing so closely on the individual shapes of the letters. It can be easy to forget the big picture of what you're spelling, so it's important to focus. And here is how you can write Wednesday in a modern calligraphy style using a brush pen. So now I will show you how to recreate this calligraphy look using any pen in faux calligraphy. So faux calligraphy is going to give us the same sort of end result look using a regular pen that doesn't have the contrast between thicks and thins as you press down. So the first step is going to be writing out your word in a monoline style using, again, any regular pen or marker or chalk, whatever you have. I'm still lifting the pen between each stroke. Even though this is monoline, I'm still focusing on getting each of these individual shapes. These are called the basic strokes or fundamental strokes of calligraphy. We have a whole video that explains what those strokes are and why they are so important. So that's step one, and then step two is going back in with the same pen, or you could use a different color, and thickening your downstrokes by adding a second line parallel to the one that you've already drawn, only on your downstrokes. So if it helps, you could sort of go back over and hover over what you've drawn. So for this oval, I came down and then up. So I'm only going to add that second line on the downstroke and leave the rest of it alone so that it stays thin. So basically we're adding thick lines to certain pieces and leaving the rest alone so that it can be a contrast between thick and thin. Take your time with this. I'm going a little bit quick for the sake of the video, but you can go much slower so that you are really following the stroke that you've drawn and being very accurate with your downstrokes. Okay, so that is how you can write Wednesday in faux calligraphy. You could go back in and color in all of these open spaces to make it look like the calligraphy look, but I will leave mine open. Now let's do some block capital letters using a brush pen. So it's the same idea of thick downstrokes, thin upstrokes applied to capital letters. These are great for complementing your calligraphy. If you're doing, like, let's say you have a quote that has lots of words, you could choose to put some of the words in block capital letters so that the calligraphy words are more emphasized. Or you could use this as like a heading style in your journal, and it's just a little bit different than your calligraphy. Let's write Wednesday in bounce lettering. So I'm going to make this W instead of having both of those pieces rest along the same baseline. This piece is going to come down below it by that much. So this is not an exact science. It's as much an art as it is kind of any measuring you could do. So just the idea is to add some variation to your strokes and make certain pieces of your letters go up higher or down lower than normal. You don't want to go too crazy, because if you make, like, let's say if this S goes really high up and down, it kind of gets hard to read or illegible. So you just want to be careful that you're not getting too crazy with it. And then you can just add some extra loops in certain spots, like that part of the W, or even like one of these Ds, you could add a loop to it like this. I like to use my iPad to try out different looks and then be able to press undo, so maybe that D can just be normal. And then this is kind of a long word, so I feel like the Y could kind of underline it a little bit. Maybe try that again. That looks like a little bit too big now. Let's add an entrance element to that W and the Y to kind of round out the beginning and the end. Okay, so that's one way you can write Wednesday in bounce lettering using the iPad. Let's write Wednesday in Copperplate. Now the W is going to have a vertical curve similar to this shade in the M. The curve here is a little bit more vertical than the 55-degree slant. And on the left side here of the W, you can add an entry element. I usually like to add a compound curve. There's a little bit of gap right here. You can have small gaps in your letters, or you can have them touch. If I had started that over a little bit farther to the right, it would have touched. Okay, now for the D in Wednesday, I'm going to try hard to make sure that my stem aligns with the right of the oval. In Tuesday, I accidentally overlapped too much of the oval. I'm going to place my pen here, and then the hard part is coming down straight along the slant line with pressure that is even and a straight stroke. So that turned out pretty well. I had to pause a minute to remember how to spell Wednesday. Also going to try to make my S not too narrow like I did in Tuesday. The dot of the S can end up inside here, or on this one, the little dot ended up to the left of that entrance stroke. So that S was a little bit better. Just trying to improve a little bit each time. Now I'll have another chance to practice the D. Okay, that one was better in that it touched the right side without overlapping it too much, but I let up on the pressure a little bit too early, so like the thick part is just a little bit too narrow towards the bottom. And I'm dipping my pen in ink off to the side every so often. Another improvement that I tried to make with this Y compared to the one before it is if you notice that there's too much space right here between this upstroke and the downstroke. So the top of the upstroke here should be covered just a little bit by the shade of the downstroke like it is here. Now let's flourish Wednesday. So I'm going to start with a horizontal oval that's a little bit bigger that connects into the W. And then I'm going to finish with another oval at the top here. Now I should have thought ahead a little bit more because I have a D coming up. So I have W, E, D. So now I need to think, do I want to try to stretch this out a little bit so that the D ends up over here? But I think what's actually going to happen is that my D stem is going to run into this. So I should have waited or made that a little bit smaller or thought ahead. I did kind of have this planned out, and in my plan I did make that oval just a little bit smaller, but I didn't do that when I actually wrote the D or the W. I'm just going to try to make the E a little bit narrower than I normally would
make the oval of the D a little bit narrower just to compensate a little bit. And then, so right here is where I'm running into the problem. So I think instead of making a solid stem, I'm going to try tapering into it here. And then I'm going to figure out what to do with that later after I write the rest of the word. So then my next flourish is going to be on the N right here, coming below the baseline. And I'm going to use this flourish to fill up some of the space that's going to end up below the word. And after you add a flourish, you can choose if you want to add an entrance stroke to your next letter. I usually do, just to keep the spacing even. Okay, now for this D, I'm also going to taper into it just to give me the opportunity to add a flourish if it looks like I want to at the end. And then here, I'm going to make the Y loop a little bit bigger and then finish with an oval that balances out this oval right here. Okay, so now I need to figure out what to do with this D. I think I'm just going to try bringing it out here with another oval shape. That kind of solves my problem of the clash right there. Now I'm going to try one more time just up here and see if I can do this again without having that clashing issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause at this point. Instead of making an oval here, I'm going to finish the rest of the word. So I finished the rest of the word here. Now I have a couple options of what I can do with this part of the W. One thing I'm seeing is that I can either fit the oval in here a little bit smaller. I'm just going to use pencil so that I can keep my options open. Either kind of fit it in right there. Another option would be to make this come out even wider and make it cross through like this. Now I like the size of this oval better. But one thing to pay attention to is that it crosses through the stem of the D and could make it look like a T. It could make it look like I'm crossing a T right here. However, in the context of this word, I think it's very recognizable and I don't think that I would be confused for a T. So I think it looks more balanced with that bigger oval. So I'm just going to go over this version with the brush pen. Unfortunately, my traced attempt with the brush pen wasn't quite as smooth as the pencil. That's okay. I'm just going to leave it at that. And then when it dries, I'll erase the pencil. So that's one way to flourish Wednesday. Actually, two ways to flourish Wednesday with a brush pen. Now let's write Wednesday in Spencerian. The W begins with an indirect oval drawn in this direction. And the shade is halfway up the height of the stem instead of being in the lower third, like in the M. Okay, so the rest of the W is thin, come up with a thin stroke, down, and then curve away. This last curve is 2 units tall. The slant of Spencerian Script is also more slanted than compared to Copperplate, so these slant lines here are 52 degrees instead of in Copperplate, which they are 55. So this is just a little bit more angled. And that is Wednesday in Spencerian.
Thanks for watching our series on how to write the days of the week in calligraphy. Let us know in the comments which style is your favorite, and check out the blog post at lovelyloops.com to see pictures of all of these styles, as well as more helpful tips and free resources. Thanks again, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.